My name is Denise Harper, and I'm 61 years old. I live alone in a two-bedroom condo tucked behind a strip mall on the west side of Tampa, where the palm trees bend easy in the wind and the air always smells a little like salt and lawn clippings. It's not glamorous, but it's home. It's quiet. And until that afternoon, it had never made me feel ashamed. I was halfway through folding a fresh load of towels, the big fluffy ones I splurged on after my last birthday, when my phone buzzed on the counter. It was a message from Eleanor, my friend from the church garden club. Can't wait to see you at Jeremy's engagement party this weekend. That resort looks dreamy. How did you keep it a secret? I froze. One towel still draped over my arm like a sash. Engagement party? What engagement party? I walked to the kitchen and sat down slowly, as if the laminate chair might give way under the sudden weight in my chest. My heart wasn't racing. No, it was worse than that. It felt like it had just stopped. Like it was trying to process something too awful to believe. I scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Jeremy since last Wednesday. Just a photo of his dog in a Halloween costume, and a thumbs up emoji I never responded to. My email had the usual Target coupons, insurance statements, and some spam about reverse mortgages, but nothing from Jeremy. No invite, no card, no mention. I checked the mail basket by the door, even though I'd already sorted it that morning. Still nothing. Not a single envelope with gold foil, or those little RSVP stickers people like to put on the back flaps. That was when it hit me. I hadn't just missed the invitation. I hadn't been invited. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for the tea kettle on the stove to scream itself hoarse, and long enough for the light outside to shift from yellow to that gray blue that settles over Florida when the humidity thickens and the sky just gives up. And then, like a punchline delivered too late to be funny, my phone buzzed again. This time from Jeremy himself. Hey Mom, hope you're well. Quick thing, could you spot me a few grand? Just until I get my next freelance payment. We're covering a lot of wedding stuff and tight on cash. That's when I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the kind that comes from somewhere deep and cracked, like a floorboard you didn't realize was rotted until you stepped too hard. I laughed. Then I cried. Then I laughed again, because if I didn't do something, I was going to crumble. He didn't ask how I was. Didn't even mention the party. He just needed money. Let me tell you something about Jeremy. He used to be the kind of boy who wrote me thank you notes with sparkly dinosaur stickers and called me his forever Valentine. When his father walked out on us on a Tuesday night after dinner, no note, just gone, it was Jeremy who crawled into bed with me and whispered, "We're still a team, right?" We were. God help me. We were a team for 29 years. I worked double shifts at the hospital gift shop and cleaned condos on the weekends, so he could have new cleats for soccer and the calculator he needed for AP math. I didn't buy a new pair of shoes for myself until he graduated college. And now I was too embarrassing to be seen at his engagement party, but not too embarrassing to fund it. I didn't text back. I didn't trust myself to say anything that wouldn't scorch the earth. Instead, I stood up, went to the linen closet, and pulled down the brown storage bin marked Jeremy, school, and baby. I hadn't touched it in years. Inside were yellowing report cards, his baby blanket, a shoelace bracelet he made me in second grade, and the kindergarten drawing that said, "I love Mommy more than Lunchables." I looked at those artifacts of a boy who used to adore me, and I realized something that cut sharper than any insult. That boy didn't exist anymore. I stayed up all night. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that text bubble asking for money, and I heard my own voice whispering excuses for him. He's stressed. Planning a wedding is hard. He didn't mean it. But no matter how I tried to spin it, the truth sat heavy on my chest like a stone. I wasn't invited because I didn't fit the image. I wasn't sleek or stylish. I didn't have high heels that matched my clutch. I wore flats from the outlet store and cardigans with sleeves I rolled up to wash dishes. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my bank. Now, this wasn't my main account. This was my just-in-case account. The one I'd started back when I was squirreling away money from side sewing jobs and leftover birthday cash. The one I never told Jeremy about. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed something that was mine. When the balance popped up on the screen, I didn't see a number. I saw leverage. I saw choices. I saw the end of begging to be included in a life I helped build. And I smiled, really smiled, for the first time in a long while. The next morning, I pulled the curtains open early, earlier than usual. The Florida sun hadn't yet baked the windows, and for a brief second, the light looked almost gentle, like it might be a soft day. But I knew better. I poured my coffee, the same brand I'd been drinking for 20 years, sat at the little two-person table in the corner of my kitchen, and looked over the numbers again. That savings account, my secret stash, wasn't huge, but it was solid. Just under $28,000. It was the result of years of frugal living and tiny victories. Coupons clipped and doubled. Birthday checks from old friends I never cashed. Sewing hems for church ladies. Selling 2 of my grandmother's rings when the air conditioning went out one summer. Jeremy didn't know about it. No one did. And now that he'd made it clear I wasn't welcome, unless I came in the form of a checkbook, I had something better than guilt to offer. I had control. I started small. I called the caterer first. "Hi," I said, my voice polite but firm. "This is Denise Harper. My son Jeremy is planning a private event with your company this weekend. I believe there's still an outstanding balance." There was a pause on the line, a shuffle of papers. Then the voice came back, warm and businesslike. "Yes, Miss Harper. We're still awaiting payment on the final invoice. Are you calling too?" "No," I said, not unkindly. "I'm calling to let you know I won't be covering it. I understand my son assumed I would, but I wasn't consulted. So I suggest you request payment directly from him or the bride's family. I'm afraid I'll no longer be participating financially." She hesitated, surprised. "Of course. Understood." I made a few more calls like that. The linen company, the florist, the wine vendor. One by one, I unhooked myself from the financial machinery of a celebration I wasn't even allowed to witness. It wasn't revenge. It was release. Now here's where it gets complicated. Because the next morning, Jeremy showed up, unannounced. I was standing at my sink rinsing blueberries when I heard the knock. Not a text, not a call. A full-body knock like someone trying to get ahead of their guilt before it grew teeth. I opened the door and there he was, my son. My beautiful, stubborn son. He was dressed casual, but his shirt was new. The kind of button-down that looks like it came from a boutique downtown. His hair was styled. His face looked tight. "Mom," he said, like I was the one who'd wronged him. I stepped aside, wordless, and he walked in. He didn't sit, just paced, looked at everything and nothing. Then he turned, arms folded. "Did you call the vendors?" "I did." "Why?" His voice cracked a little, more with confusion than anger. "Why would you do that?" I took a breath, one hand resting on the back of the chair I'd nursed him in after a nasty bout of strep when he was 6. I looked him square in the eyes. "Because you didn't invite me, Jeremy." He blinked, just once, like he hadn't expected it to sting when said out loud. "I didn't think you'd want to come," he said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "Because my shoes aren't high enough? Because I can't pronounce the name of the champagne." He didn't answer. I stepped closer, not angry, just sure. "You didn't want me there, but you wanted my money. And that tells me everything I need to know." "It's not like that," he said, but it was soft, weak. "Then tell me what it's like." He looked down, then up. "It's complicated. Hannah's family, they're particular. She wanted a certain look." "Ah," I said, "a certain look." And I didn't fit. He didn't say a word. So I said it for him. "Well, Jeremy, I hope Hannah's family likes simple weddings, because you're going to need to plan one with the budget you have." And with that, I picked up the bowl of blueberries, turned back to the sink, and let him stand there in the silence he had built all by himself. He left without another word. The door shut gently behind him. And I, Denise Harper, 61 years old and finally not afraid of being inconvenient, sat down with my coffee and my blueberries and smiled for the first real time in weeks. The fallout didn't come with fireworks. It came in slow, subtle waves, the kind that wear down the shoreline over time, not the kind that knock your feet out from under you. But oh, did it come? It started the next morning with a phone call. Unknown number, but the area code was familiar, Orlando. "Denise, The voice said, soft and clipped. Yes, this is Trisha Martin, Hannah's mother. Of course it was. She didn't waste time on pleasantries. I understand there's been some miscommunication regarding the wedding arrangements. I sat at the table, sipped my tea, and stared at the little ring it left on the wood. I'd say there's been a very clear communication, I replied. A pause. Then, I'm not sure if you realize how difficult this puts things for us. We're just days out, and Jeremy assured us. I didn't promise anything, I interrupted. And Jeremy didn't ask. He assumed. There's a difference. She took a breath, sharp and quiet. I just hope you're not doing this to make a point. That got a chuckle out of me. Oh, honey, I said, if I wanted to make a point, I'd show up in a neon dress and give a toast about how I once sold my engagement ring to pay for his wisdom teeth. She hung up not long after that. Politely, of course. Very politely. And then things got quiet again. Until Jeremy texted. Can we talk? I didn't answer. Not right away. I needed time. I needed space. I needed to remember I wasn't the villain here. But I didn't want to let bitterness take root. That's the danger, isn't it? When you've been used, dismissed, or forgotten, the hardest part isn't the pain. It's not becoming someone you don't recognize in the aftermath. So I called someone who still remembered me. Hazel. We'd been neighbors back when Jeremy was in 5th grade, when we both lived in that old duplex with the chipped paint and the jasmine bush that refused to bloom. Hazel and I hadn't talked in a few months. Not because of any drama, just life. But I needed a voice that wasn't trying to extract anything from me. When she picked up, I barely got the words out before she said, "Oh, sugar, come over. I just pulled banana bread out of the oven." That banana bread saved me. Or maybe it was the way Hazel talked, leaning over her chipped laminate counter like the world hadn't turned upside down the way it had for me. We drank coffee in chipped mugs and talked about old TV shows, and the time I accidentally wore 2 different shoes to the PDA fundraiser and nobody noticed until I got home. "You still have that spark," she said, handing me a second slice. "Don't let them dull it just because they're embarrassed by your shine." It stuck with me, that phrase. Embarrassed by your shine. Because that's exactly what it was. They weren't ashamed of me. They were afraid of how I didn't fit the mold they'd built around themselves. Their curated, filtered, luxury-wrapped lives. And I was a woman with strong thighs, soft hands, and a voice they couldn't quite soften. So I made another decision. That evening, I called Jeremy back. He answered fast. "Mom, I'm not angry," I said. "I'm hurt." He was quiet. "Good. Let it settle. I raised you better than this," I continued. "Not better to throw a lavish wedding, or better to wear the right suit. I raised you to see people, to value them. And somehow you've forgotten the difference between wealth and worth." I didn't mean to. I know I cut in. But you did. He sighed. I imagined him running his hand through his hair like he used to when he got caught sneaking cookies before dinner. I thought if we kept things simple, less complicated. "Jeremy," I said, calm but clear, "you thought I would quietly write the check, smile from the sidelines, and disappear. But I'm not going to disappear. Not from your life, and certainly not from my own." Another pause, then a small voice. "So, does that mean you're coming?" I shook my head, even though he couldn't see it. "No, sweetheart. Not this time. This one you'll have to manage without me." And for once, I think he finally understood what that meant. I didn't hear another word from Jeremy for 5 days. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a thumbs up emoji. And the silence didn't ache the way I thought it would. It felt more like an exhale long overdue. Deep and clearing. I wasn't bracing for the next flight. I wasn't checking my phone every 15 minutes like I was waiting for a bus that never came. Instead, I went about my days like I'd finally remembered I had them. I took a walk every morning around the pond by the old post office. I made lemon bars for Hazel and dropped them off with a little note that said, "Thanks for seeing me." I even called my sister Lorraine in Ocala, who I usually avoid because she has a way of turning every conversation into a critique, and told her flat out, "Don't start." I'm too tired for disapproval today. To my shock, she didn't. She actually said, "Good for you." The day of the engagement party, I knew the moment it had started. My phone began buzzing around 5:15 p.m., one notification after another. Not from Jeremy, but from friends. From women I'd known through church, through bake sales, through decades of sitting on plastic chairs while our kids kicked soccer balls and forgot their water bottles. First it was Eleanor. Where are you? Thought you were hosting. Then Roseanne. Everything okay? You're not here. And they said you weren't coming. And finally, Clara from the women's circle, who never minces words. I heard what happened. Good for you, honey. About damn time. I didn't respond to any of them. Instead, I sat on my little balcony with a glass of wine I'd been saving for something special, and I watched the sunset turn the tops of the palm trees gold. And I let it happen. The wedding party, the clinking glasses, the flash photography, the speeches without my name. I let all of it roll by like a train I'd decided not to board. But around 8:30, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a call. Jeremy. I let it go to voicemail. He didn't leave one. The next morning, I found out through Hazel, of course it was Hazel, she knows everything before it's printed, that the party had gone off fine, mostly. The caterer downgraded the menu after my withdrawal, so instead of a plated dinner, guests had to navigate finger foods and mini quiches. The string quartet canceled last minute because the deposit had never been finalized. And the beachfront fire pit ceremony ended early because a surprise thunderstorm rolled in with a vengeance. That's what happens when you try to host a party without your mother's blessing, Hazel said, nodding solemnly, like it was a matter of divine justice. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. A few days later, a package arrived. Small, hand-addressed, no return label. I knew that handwriting before I even opened it. Inside was a photo. Jeremy and Hannah on the beach, wind-blown, smiling for the camera. He looked happy, but not quite comfortable. Not quite grounded. Tucked behind the photo was a folded note. Short. Only one sentence. I'm sorry, Mom. I really messed this up. No excuses. No justification. Just 7 words that said everything I'd waited to hear. I didn't respond right away. I gave myself time, real time, to sit with what it meant to be seen, even a little, after being overlooked for so long. I let myself feel the weight of it, the grief and the relief. The cracked open spaces where hurt had settled and now had room to shift. But that night, I took out my own box, my memories, my keepsakes, and I added that photo. Not because I forgave him yet. Not because it was a happy memory, but because it was honest. And after everything, I realized I'd rather have honesty than perfection any day. A week passed. Then 2. I heard nothing. Not from Jeremy, not from Hannah, not from Trisha with the clipped vowels and delicate passive aggression. The quiet stretched so long I started to wonder if that note, the apology in 7 words, had been a momentary flicker of guilt and nothing more. Then, just after church on a breezy Sunday, my phone rang again. Jeremy. This time I answered. Hey, he said, voice low and tentative. Do you want to get lunch? I hesitated, not because I didn't want to see him, but because I wanted to see him right. I didn't want a repeat of our last face-to-face, where he paced like a boy caught red-handed, and I felt like furniture being rearranged out of the frame. So I said, only if you're coming to eat, not to explain. He paused. That's fair. We met at a small Cuban cafe I liked, a place I doubted Hannah would ever set foot in. It was off the main road, tucked between a tax office and a dry cleaner, and the best thing on the menu was the ropa vieja with extra plantains. I was already seated when he walked in, and I watched him scan the room for me like he wasn't sure I'd actually show. He looked tired, not physically, but in the soul-deep way you get when your pride's been carrying too much weight. He hugged me, tentative at first, then tighter. It was short but real. We sat. The waitress poured water. The air smelled like citrus and old tile and sizzling pork, and neither of us spoke for the first full minute. Then he cleared his throat. I owe you a lot more than an apology. I didn't nod, didn't rush to fill the space. I let it hang there. I was embarrassed, he said. Not of you, he added quickly, but of how little I'd done to earn what you gave me. And I guess I wanted to pretend I was further along than I was, that I didn't still need my mom to bail me out. I stirred my iced tea slowly. Jeremy, Needing help doesn't make you weak. But using people and cutting them out? That's not strength either. That's fear dressed up as pride. He nodded, looking down at the condensation on his glass. I thought Hannah's family would respect me more if we pulled it off without help. But instead, I let their version of acceptable override everything that mattered, including you. The food came. We ate in silence for a bit, and for the first time in what felt like years, it was the kind of silence that made room for understanding, not resentment. I want to fix things, he said, halfway through his sandwich. But I don't know where to start. Start by seeing me, I said gently. Not as your bank account. Not as someone who blends into the background. As your mother. As Denise. A whole person. He nodded. I can do that. And maybe, I added, you tell Hannah that the next time there's a party involving family, the woman who held your head during stomach flu and taught you how to tie a tie is not optional. A small, sheepish laugh escaped him. I will. We didn't hug again when we left. But he walked me to my car, opened the door for me like he used to do when he was trying to be gentlemanly at 14. He didn't ask for anything, and I didn't offer. Not yet. I went home, sat in my recliner, and let the warm, full ache of something shifting sink into my bones. It wasn't reconciliation, not fully, but it was the start of something truer than what we'd been pretending. And that was enough. 3 days after our lunch, Jeremy showed up again. This time without warning. No call, no text, just a knock at the door, like the old days when he'd come by after work just to raid the fridge or nap on my couch. I opened the door, and there he stood, holding a pie. An actual, store-bought, plastic-covered pie. Peach, he said, sheepish. You always liked peach. I stared at it for a second, then stepped aside to let him in. I did, I said. Still do. He followed me into the kitchen and set it on the counter like it was a peace offering from a country still uncertain about the treaty. Then he did something unexpected. He rolled up his sleeves and started rinsing dishes in the sink. Jeremy, I said, what are you doing? Helping, he said over his shoulder. Just helping. It shouldn't have meant anything, but it did, because for once, he wasn't waiting to be served or doted on. He was participating, contributing, trying. Afterward, we sat on the back porch. The late afternoon sun filtered through the screen door, and the neighbor's dog barked at nothing in particular. The breeze carried the smell of jasmine and something warm, earthy. Jeremy leaned back in the old patio chair, the one I'd threatened to replace for 5 years and never had. We had a fight, he said quietly. Hannah and me. About the party. About you. I didn't say anything. I didn't even look at him. I just kept my eyes on the squirrels playing tag across the fence line. She said I should have handled it better, that it was heartless to leave you out. Now that surprised me. I turned slightly, raising an eyebrow. She said that. He nodded. She told me if someone had done that to her mother, she'd never forgive them. She said, he paused, looking down at his hands. She said maybe we weren't ready to get married. My breath caught, not because I wanted their engagement to end, but because I hadn't expected Hannah, the girl who once called my living room cluttered, to have more sense than my own son. Did you listen to her? I asked. He nodded again. Yeah, for once I really did. Silence fell between us, but it wasn't heavy. It was the kind of silence that follows the truth, the kind that gives it space to breathe. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out something small, a folded check. I tensed. Jeremy, it's not for me, he said quickly. Well, not exactly. Hannah and I decided to pay you back. For the rings, for the deposits, for everything you put into that party before we decided you didn't belong. I looked at the check without touching it. You can't undo that choice with money. I know, he said, his voice steady. But it's not about undoing it. It's about acknowledging it. That was when I realized he was growing. Not just older, but up. Finally, I didn't take the check. Not then. I told him to leave it on the table, and I'd think about it. We spent the rest of the evening talking about nothing important, silly memories, favorite movies, how I once gave him a haircut, so crooked he wore a beanie for 2 weeks. It felt good, simple, real. And as he got up to leave, he hesitated in the doorway. Mom, yes, I'm not going to mess this up again. I believed him. Not because he said it, but because for the first time in a long while, he showed it. It was a Thursday afternoon when I finally opened the wedding invitation. The real one. It came in a pale blue envelope, hand-addressed this time, not typed, not mass-produced. The return label was Jeremy and Hannah's new apartment in downtown Tampa. No monogram, just a regular stamp and my name written with care. Inside was thick cardstock, soft to the touch. The kind that whispers wealth even when it's whispering apology. There was no flashy gold trim this time. Just elegant lettering on cream paper and a personal note tucked inside. Mom, this time I want you there. Not just because you're my mother, but because you're the heart of the family and I finally get that now. Love, Jeremy. I held the envelope to my chest and just sat. For a long time. Long enough for the sun to shift across the floor and the cat to jump up beside me, curling into the crook of my arm like it knew I needed grounding. Funny how something as simple as being invited can feel like a revolution. The wedding was scheduled for early spring, outdoors but modest. Smaller venue, fewer guests, and, according to Jeremy, a whole new approach. We're cutting out the fluff, he said during our last call. Just the people who matter. Still, I hesitated. Not out of bitterness, but self-protection. Because while I believe Jeremy was trying, I'd also learned that a woman of my age doesn't unlearn decades of silence overnight. I needed to decide who I wanted to be at that wedding. Not just whether I'd attend, but whether I'd show up as someone who'd learned her own worth. So I made a list. Not of people, but of boundaries. Things I would and wouldn't tolerate. Conversations I wouldn't shrink from. Traditions I'd no longer uphold just for the sake of appearance. I even wrote it in my good notebook, the one with the fabric cover and the pen loop, like it was a vow to myself. I will not sit in the back. I will not pay for silence. I will not apologize for taking up space. I will speak when I have something to say. I will wear something that makes me feel beautiful, not appropriate. I underlined that last one twice. A few days later, Hannah called. For the first time. She was nervous. I could hear it in her breath. "Hi, Miss Harper," she said. It's Hannah." I didn't answer right away. I let her sit in that quiet space she'd never had to fill before. "I want to say thank you," she rushed, "for everything. And to say I'm sorry. Truly." She went on. Told me she'd been swept up in expectations, her mother's, her friends. That she'd assumed things about me without ever taking the time to know me. "I just want you to know," she added, voice soft, "we're building something new now. And I hope there's space for you in it." That did it. Not because it was perfect, but because it was human. "I appreciate that," I said. "I really do." We talked for another 10 minutes. About cake flavors and awkward uncles and whether or not to skip the bouquet toss. And by the end of the call, I didn't feel like the ghost in the kitchen anymore. I felt like someone pulling up a chair to the table. Finally. The next morning, I went shopping. Not for anyone else, for me. I found a dress. Deep sapphire blue, flowing but fitted, with sleeves that kissed my wrists and a neckline that made me feel elegant, not invisible. I looked at myself in the dressing room mirror and didn't see someone trying to fit in. I saw someone who had arrived. The morning of the wedding was warm but not oppressive. One of those rare spring days in Florida where the humidity takes a nap and the sky stays scrubbed clean. The kind of day people say couldn't have been more perfect in a slideshow caption. I woke early, out of habit more than excitement, and made myself a real breakfast. Eggs, toast, the good jam from the farmer's market. I played Sam Cooke on the little Bluetooth speaker Jeremy bought me 3 Christmases ago, back before everything went sideways. When it came time to dress, I moved slow and deliberate. My new sapphire dress hung by the closet like it had been waiting its whole life for this exact occasion. I slipped it on, fastened the necklace Lorraine gave me years ago, and looked at myself in the mirror. I didn't look like a mother of the groom. I looked like me. When I arrived at the venue, a botanical garden tucked just outside Tampa proper, I was directed by a young man in suspenders to the reserved section. "Denise Harper?" he asked, glancing at the guest list. "That's me." He smiled wide, genuine. "You've got front row, left aisle. Right behind the couple." I blinked. "Are you sure?" "Yup," he said. "Marked in gold ink. Reserved for mother of the groom." My chest tightened. not with nerves, but something closer to awe. I thanked him, walked down the path lined with wildflowers, and took my seat. No kitchen doors this time. No tray tables. No whispered apologies about aesthetic. I was right there in the open on display. And I was seen. Jeremy spotted me as he came down the aisle with the officiant. His eyes flicked to me just for a second, and he gave me the smallest, most genuine smile. The kind he used to give me when I'd surprise him with pancakes after a hard test. I smiled back, steady and unshaken. The ceremony was short and sweet. Hannah looked beautiful, radiant even, but more than that, she looked grounded. Like someone who'd finally unclenched her grip on perfection and was holding something real instead. Their vows made me cry, but not the big heaving kind. Just the slow, steady warmth leaking down my cheeks. I didn't wipe them away. After the ceremony, during the cocktail hour, I stood near the fountain, sipping lemonade and waiting for the inevitable. And sure enough, Trisha appeared. She was in a silk wrap dress and heels too high for the gravel path. Her lipstick was flawless. So was her discomfort. "Denise," she said, the smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Trisha." She hesitated, then added, "It was a lovely ceremony, wasn't it?" "It really was." Another pause. "I understand you helped pay for the rings," she said, her voice like velvet over gravel. I sipped my drink. "I did." "Well," she said, shifting her weight, "I just wanted to say, I hope everything's worked out now." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw a woman who wasn't used to being uncomfortable. I smiled. Not cruelly, not smugly, just with calm certainty. "Oh, I'm not waiting for things to work out anymore," I said. "I'm just making sure I don't get left out of my own story again." She blinked, opened her mouth, and then closed it again. That was the last we spoke. Later, during dinner, Jeremy stood and raised his glass. "Before I say anything else," he said, "I want to thank the person who taught me what love looks like, not just when it's easy, but when it costs you something." He turned to me. "Mom," he said, "I messed up. And you didn't walk away. You reminded me who I am." He raised his glass a little higher. "To the woman who's always been there, even when I didn't see her." I didn't cry. Not then. But I did toast him back. And for the first time in years, it felt like we were a team again. I never expected to dance at the wedding. Not because I didn't want to, I did, but because frankly, I assumed no one would ask. But near the end of the evening, just after the cake had been cut and folks were milling around with loosened ties and kicked off heels, Jeremy appeared beside me. He didn't say anything at first. He just held out his hand. "Would you?" My eyes flicked toward the dance floor. A slow song was playing, something soft and old-fashioned, the kind that wraps around you like a memory. "Really?" I asked, more surprised than skeptical. "I think I owe you at least that," he said, grinning. "Probably more." I stood, smoothed my dress, and took his hand. "Now, here's the thing. Dancing with your grown child isn't like it is in the movies. It's not some perfect moment choreographed for photos. It's awkward at first, a little stiff, full of jokes and nervous glances. But then something shifts. You both loosen, and for a minute you remember. You remember what it felt like when you were the only woman he ever needed, and he was the little boy who wrapped his arms around your waist during every grocery store trip. We swayed. That's all we did. No spinning, no flair, just swaying. I've been thinking about that night," Jeremy said softly. "The night I asked you for money." I stayed quiet, letting him finish. "You didn't say anything cruel. You didn't yell. But you drew a line. And that was what I needed. Not your wallet. Your boundary." I didn't answer. I just squeezed his hand. "It woke me up," he said. "It made me realize what I was becoming." We danced a little longer, surrounded by strangers, family, and half-eaten slices of vanilla almond cake. It didn't matter. Nothing mattered except the quiet reconciliation happening one step at a time. When the song ended, he kissed my cheek. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For not disappearing. Even when I acted like I wanted you to." Later, I sat with Hazel at one of the leftover tables, our heels off, plates empty but our hearts full. "You did it," she said, nodding toward Jeremy and Hannah as they laughed with guests near the gift table. "No," I said. "We did it. All us mothers who keep showing up even after the door's been shut in our face." Hazel reached across the table and patted my hand. Damn right we do. Just then a little girl, someone's niece, I think, ran past the table with pink frosting on her chin and a crumpled napkin in her fist. She laughed like the world hadn't given her a reason not to. And in that moment, I realized something. I hadn't just reclaimed my place in my son's life. I'd reclaimed my place in my life. The Monday after the wedding, my house was still. Not silent in a lonely way. No, it was the kind of quiet that follows something good. Like the hush after a song ends and everyone's still swaying, unwilling to speak just yet. That's how it felt. Like the final note had landed, and now all that was left was the echo. I put the sapphire dress back in its garment bag, not because I was done with it, but because it had earned a place of honor. I'd wear it again, I decided. Maybe for no reason at all. Maybe just to sit on my porch and read a book, looking exactly as worthy as I'd always been, whether anyone saw it or not. Jeremy called that afternoon. I was thinking, he said. We should do dinner soon. Just you and me. I smiled. Your treat this time? He laughed. Absolutely. And next time we have a family gathering, you get the first invite. No exceptions. It wasn't about the invite anymore. It was about the space, the acknowledgement, the place at the table that had always been mine, whether anyone reserved it or not. That week, I started something new. I bought a fresh notebook, leather-bound, thick pages, the kind that feels like it's meant for more than grocery lists. And on the first page, I wrote, I will not be small for the sake of anyone else's comfort. Then I started writing my story, not just the recent one, but all of it. The decades of holding others up, the sacrifices no one noticed, the quiet power it took to keep a household running while being treated like background scenery. I wrote it not because I needed revenge, but because I needed truth. And truth, I've learned, is its own kind of freedom. A few Sundays later, at the church potluck, someone asked me how the wedding went. Beautiful, I said honestly. But the best part wasn't the flowers or the vows. Oh, they asked. What was it then? I smiled. It was remembering who I am. Because that's the thing they never tell you. Sometimes you have to lose your place in someone else's story to finally write your own. And I wasn't just the mother of the groom. I was the woman who said no when it counted. The woman who didn't fund her own erasure. The woman who showed up for herself, fully, fiercely, and finally.